Hi, I'm Tyler, and this is the Fox Valley Film Critics. In this episode of the show, we're going to be discussing the 51st in the lineup of the AFI's Top 100 American Films, West Side Story, as well as the newest thriller by M. Night Shyamalan, Glass. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to the show, brought to you by Groupthink Productions and FVTV. Joining us today is a professor from my alma mater, Killian Heilsberg.
Hi.
Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
I've been wanting to bring on someone from my old school for the longest time now, so I'm glad you're the first. So
yeah.
Take that, people in my own department.
Well, they should be here because this is a lot of fun.
Yes,
so
they need to start returning my
more.
calls. Love them all. Anyway, so we're going to start out with West Side Story. So.
Yay. Do you ask questions first, or do I just dive right in?
We can do whatever we want.
Because Rita Moreno is my hero. I absolutely adore her, and her work in this was just awesome. I really, really loved her energy. I love what she's doing now. In preparation for this, I sort of did some Googling, and right now she's in One Day at a Time, the reboot, which, I've got to admit I'm not that interested in, but I am interested in the fact that she's 87 years old and still working and still energetic and still dancing and still an awesome force of nature.
There are still people from this movie that are still doing things?
Yes, there are. I guess, yeah, Russ Tamblin's not so much, but he does show up from, anyway, yeah, Twin Peaks reference, sorry.
I know two of the actors from Twin Peaks are in this movie. I just watched your video essay on it this morning. He's like, yeah, that blew my mind too. Yeah,
kind of awesome. And, I don't really think it's that big of a jump from West Side Story to Twin Peaks. You ready for that one?
This is it's hot take time, people. Time for a spicy hot take.
So Twin Peaks talks about sort of, or at least on some levels you could interpret Twin Peaks as looking at the American dream and kind of a fall of it, or the lies that are underneath what we have been sold as the perfection of possibility.
You can talk about Twin Peaks.
and then West Side Story, I think, does a lot of the same things. Especially in the song America, there is, the sort of argument of this is a really beautiful place, and yet this is a place that isn't very welcoming, and yet it is, but it isn't. So if you look at Twin Peaks, it's doing a lot of the same things. There's a welcoming promise, and yet sort of a bite that comes with it. But then you could also extend that to just about everything, because nothing is ever perfect. So you can follow the thread all the way from Jerome Robbins to David Lynch to us. Don't look for perfection because it's not there, accept the beauty of what is and adventure with what you have.
Sure, there's definitely a strong, no, I agree. It's a beautiful way to put it. There's definitely a strong kind of undercurrent of trying to overcome that, and by the end of the story, there's certainly a bite in just watching all the tragedy and consequences just raining down on these characters, and just getting to see someone broken by the effect of all that.
Right.
I mean, to radically change the subject.
Oh, sorry.
I had a story I wanted to share on this, because this was actually, I remember seeing this as a kid, and I had a weird introduction to this movie in that I had just read The Outsiders for the first time, and that was one of the first books I ever really connected with back in junior high. And I was talking to my mother about it, and she's like, oh, I have a movie you'd probably like, because it's got gangsters in it too. And I'm just like, oh, cool, is it the same ones from the book? And it's like, well, not exactly, but they're very similar. And I put the movie on, I'm like, this is taking a long time snapping right now. So I wasn't quite in the right headspace for this when I was growing up. Yeah. But having seen it in full, I think twice now, I mean, I think I appreciate it more, obviously, because this is one of the big American musicals, obviously, from the time when that was pertinent. You had Sondheim and Robert Wise, acclaimed director of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, also a bunch of other major musicals. So. And I think this is the third one we've done on this show. We also did Singing in the Rain and Sound of Music.
Oh,
out of order, mind you.
Yeah.
Because I made a clerical error, and for some reason I thought they were the same movie. So when I was incredibly stupid when I started the show. So it's amazing how much you changed in 2 years.
You have learned so much. I think it's from all those awesome people who won't join you on the show and should be here, because their influence is felt in your improvements.
All of my audio teachers. Yeah. I didn't learn me nothing in college. Anyway.
Probably another thing that I really liked about it was the Officer Krupke song. Sondheim doing the lyrics. He, apparently 25 years old when he was doing lyrics, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Wow.
But, you know, Google, anyway. I don't know that that's necessarily true, but I'll go with what the internet tells me.
I could see this being like an outgrowth of young, energetic filmmakers.
Yeah.
They're hip. They're in with the kids nowadays. Like they talk like the kids.
And that's exactly what he was doing. You can see the development of his language early on in this one, especially Krupke, where he's playing with the words and playing with the rhymes and the cadences and such. But also he has this beautiful way of, again, another dichotomy. On one level, it looks like the song is saying, you know, there is actually this problem endemic that, you know, this kid has nothing and there's no hope and everybody's falling apart. Whereas on the other hand, him using it as a weapon against society is kind of a different take on it. It's not just, please pity me. It's like, please pity me so I can manipulate you and get away with it. And it sort of brings up the idea of looking at, yes, this could actually be an issue, but where is the issue and how do we use it? And anyway, so
yeah, there's a lot of complex moralism going on in this, where it's not. You can tell that these kids are all products of their environment, but at the same time they're also doing bad things by their own volition. So there's kind of a tension there between their individuality and between the society they're living in, which is that's a very 50s theme.
And so awesomely choreographed, lots and lots of amazing dancing. You know, the story is told not just through the words and the music, but also through the movements. It's gorgeous choreography, and you know, especially in America, where the sort of back and forth, the dancing and the sort of sensuality of the women showing this is what we want, and the men showing this is specifically what we're receiving, and it shows the different looks at how people are treated, and you know, like the punching and anyway, so yes. That gorgeous sort of bridge part.
There is a level of camp over it, though. I mean, this is the movie that established the concept that these hard-bitten New York thugs are walking around the street dancing,
which you know is how I still view New York. I expect every time I go there to have like hordes of dancers coming at me and you know, just hustling through the streets, trying to catch their trains.
New York is a multifaceted place. There are flash dancers and there are criminals, but usually they're not the same. It reminds me of that Family Guy joke where Peter tries to join a gang and they're like, okay, you can't join us unless you have 2 years of tap and 3 years of ballet, okay?
Right.
Get out.
Exactly. I think that gangs have standards.
Okay, maybe not quite that, but...
Okay, yeah, fair. So why did you pick West Side Story?
Because I'm a slave to the AFI list, so...
Ah, okay.
I mean, that's our format. We have to go through one AFI movie that's numbered to the episode, so...
Okay.
And the only time we go off that standard is when I screw up and mess up the numbers, so...
Right, okay. Yeah, that Singing in the Rain, Sound of Music debacle.
Although I think I misaligned It's a Wonderful Life because I wanted to pair it with the Christmas special, so... What are you going to do?
Do you really think of It's a Wonderful Life as a Christmas? I'm sorry, I was trying to ask that with a straight face.
I think it was a better alternative than whatever else was on the list. So.
That's true. That's true.
It's like, well, the alternative is It's a Wonderful Life and Midnight Cowboy. So which is going to feel like we feel better?
Oh, okay. I totally would have picked Midnight Cowboy myself, but I don't know that that's a popular thing. Yeah, exactly. Let's go camp. So also another thing about West Side Story is I like how they rewrote the ending. I like how Maria...
Yeah. Wait, was it different? I know it was based off of Romeo and Juliet.
Right, and they both died in Romeo and Juliet.
Yes, well, spoilers for West Side Story. But
I'm sorry,
no, if you haven't seen West Side Story yet.
It's kind of not a thing. Yeah. It's been over a year, it's been out, so sort of
you're across the line of spoilers.
Sorry. Oh, I guess I didn't ask about that. Am I allowed to talk about
You can
spoilers?
talk about, yeah.
I knew with Glass I shouldn't talk about spoilers,
I mean,
but West Side Story I thought was
we'll talk about
open.
that. We'll talk about that in a
season.
sec. But
Okay.
with
but
this,
just,
with this, obviously, it's based on Romeo and Juliet,
Right.
so it's famous for that, and it has all these themes about hostility and racial tension, and so you can kind of guess where it's going towards the end.
Right.
Like if you can, there's a version of this where it has like the Victorian Romeo and Juliet happy ending where it's like they get to live and get married and everyone's happy at the end, but no.
I think in a way for me the happiness of her surviving is worth it, right?
Well, the whole point of her surviving is that she has to be the one to give the final soliloquy.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's like the person that is the most victimized by the events is the one that has to stare them in the face and threaten to fight them back, and just it's the literal embodiment of the cycle of violence. So
Yeah, exactly. Ooh, nicely put. Yay. Awesome.
But yeah, I think that if it had a different, if they'd both died, it would have been a very cold ending. If it had been the officer who did it, and that would have been just completely different.
Wow. Yeah, I don't even want to go through some of the ramifications. That come with that one.
That's all the time we have for this segment. Join us for the following segment. We'll be discussing Glass. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome back. Now we get to talk about Glass.
Yay.
So I am very fascinated by this film.
Okay.
So I've been thinking about this film for the past month, which we've had time to think about it and look. And well, I only saw it the one time, so I find this movie to be incredibly complex and personal and interesting, and it's also a complete mess. So.
Yes.
But the problem I have with this film is that I think the movie is making intentional decisions that you can either read as the director trying to be subversive and subvert his genre, or as the fact, there also could be effects of the fact that the director only had one location to shoot at. So.
Well, I would. Well, okay, yeah.
Let's just say. Let's just say spoilers on this, because if you want to see Glass and you haven't seen Glass yet, you're not missing out on much. It's 90 minutes of very slow-paced and deliberate dialogue, and there's a lot of setup, and then the last 20 minutes is just plot twist, plot twist, plot twist, plot twist.
Right.
Like, I don't think I've ever seen Shyamalan pile on plot twists quite like this before.
Did you ever do that with like a string? You wrap it around your finger until your finger turns really, really bright blue, and then you let it go? That's what the ending was for me. It was kind of like the entire,
I thought the implications were fascinating, but they should have written it into the rest of the story.
And it seemed like the bulk of the film was all the stuff around what was actually happening. It was like everybody was explaining so much that I never really saw anything going on until about, I think it was really when Mr. Glass started waking up, so to speak. You know, once that shift happened, that was where things started to become action. But then, like you said, I mean, not long after that, we had just plot twist, plot twist, plot twist. Up until then, it was so much direct address to the camera, and it was the film literally telling us what was happening in the film instead of us being part of the joke or part of the story, at least to me.
That first hour feels completely it's very uneven and very strange. Like you can tell they had to shoot based around the availability of the actors. Like we got Bruce Willis for 3 days, so we got to shoot all our films and all the film with him in 3 days. Or you got Samuel Jackson for a couple days, and it's like so you see that reflected in the runtime where they have some of the best stuff in the film, but they are only relegated to like small 10, 20-minute chunks of it, and then they'll have a small scene here or there, and then they finally get to the end finale, and then everything is revealed about their character. So it's, I think James McAvoy is still great because the reason everyone is going to see this movie is because Split is like the most wonderful thing ever, but I don't know why that movie is so good compared to Glass specifically. I don't know if it's because the script's old. I don't know if it's because he just honed in on this one specific this one specific place where he could just build a script out of it and it became tense, or if it's just because he's too ambitious and he can't make a film that he wants. It's so complicated to unravel. And the one thing I really like about Glass is that I actually kind of see his vision here. I mean, it's kind of this Incredibles-esque morality tale by the end of it, where it's revealed it's about the suppression of greatness. And I'm like, well, I can see Shyamalan telling that story.
Yeah, he could have done it a little shorter, but yes. And for me, the frustration was I started picking it apart to try to figure out why he was doing some of the things he was doing while I was watching the film, which the sign of a really good film for me is to not see things for a while. You know, the idea of all the intention being invisible long enough for me to lose myself in the moment. And I started to think, why is he having all these specific center-framed direct address moments? And then I thought back and thought, well, okay, it's entirely possible he's trying to shoot this exactly like a comic book. Because in a comic book, you often have those specific panels with the face talking to you, letting you know exactly what's going on. And then I started looking at all the other shots and started thinking, especially the shots outside with the van at the end, right? I don't think I'm giving spoilers with that, even though, we've allowed for them.
There's a fight scene with a van, yes.
Right. The fight scene with the van, and a lot of that looked exactly like, almost like an Andrea Sorrentino panel, like maybe from his run of Green Arrow with Jeff Lemire. It was reminding me of that kind of scope in the frame. So I started thinking maybe Shyamalan was making a comic book film, which of course he is. I mean, that's what, but more than just superhero, he was making it with the comic book language, which for me was why I was having so much trouble, because film language and comic book language, even though they're both sequential art, is so different. So trying to force it into that kind of language just fell apart for me.
I don't know if I would push back on that.
Okay.
I think he's trying to make something that's almost entirely grounded, and I don't think doing that style and something a hyperkinetic style like that with the comic book flashes, it doesn't quite work when you're trying to do like a grounded story. This Unbreakable and Split, they're not trying to be big scope superhero movies.
Sure, no.
Which is, I mean, that's why whenever you see a Marvel movie and they do actually pull back the camera and have those giant moments where you see all the people at once and doing their action pose the same second, like that feels like they're trying purposely to capture that kind of comic moment. With this, it's trying to scale that back and trying to be like, what would happen if they were superheroes in real life? And they're like, well, they're not going to. Maybe wouldn't that clash slightly? I mean, this
sure, yeah.
Glass definitely feels like the most comic booky of the three, but
well, I mean, for me, Unbreakable is my favorite superhero movie of all time.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't. But it's my favorite superhero movie of all time simply because of that understated quality. And Split, I think, does the same thing. It has an understated, and when I'm talking about sort of a comic book language, I'm not talking about Golden Age DC or Golden Age Marvel, or even the grandeur of what a superhero is, but more on the sort of smaller stories that we're getting, especially with Vertigo, or even, again, I'm going to bring up Lemire because I think he does things with superheroes that's fabulous, especially Black Hammer. The whole, this world where they are no longer in the place where their heroism is worshipped, but they are in the real world where their heroism now has to be a part of the dynamic they exist with. And so that makes a big difference. I think that's in large part why I resonate with the series, but also that's again why I'm thinking when he builds the frames, it is that comic book kind of thing, because he's trying to tell the story with a new language. Which he doesn't use in Split and he doesn't use in Unbreakable. His filmic language in Glass is different.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it definitely being more of the independent style, but my only problem with that is that that's not what people are familiar with.
Sure.
At least because they constantly name drop like Superman and people like that, and it's like I think that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to do that kind of stuff. I mean, there's the very famous poster of this movie that was done by Alex Ross. So like I see that kind of style more than I see any independent comic style. Like,
sure.
If you told me that that he was actually like a huge indie comic fan, and was like, oh, Shyamalan reads Vertigo, I would believe that because that's contemporary and that's something people who don't like superhero comics will read. But I think that Glass is clearly trying to kind of subvert superheroes. At the same time, it's trying to embrace it, and there's a lot of confusing language. But I mean, again, it just comes down to me of what is he trying to say with this film? How does he say it? And is it worth saying to begin with?
Yeah, okay.
Because I get this film is simultaneously a massive ego trip. It's very cheap, and it's, I don't know, what am I trying to say? This is such a, you were right when you say this is just something to unwind. It's because there's so much to uncoil here. But
and all of it gets you twisted up rather than interested. You know, it's like, it's almost like it causes pressure to think about it rather than allows sort of an ebb and flow of pressure, which a good film does. A good film allows you those moments of quiet consideration. This one didn't have that. It didn't have those lulls where my mind could start to piece together what had been. It just kept hammering me and squishing me to the point where I was like, I'm not sure I really want to play with you anymore. So, you know, I wandered off in my head. But I came back as quick as I could because I knew we would be talking about it. I was like, no, we got to talk a bit. Yeah, I'll watch you.
So yeah, I give Shyamalan credit to the fact that there is something that they're in this film, that there's layers. I mean, I don't mind when a film is just this complex labyrinthine thing, especially when it's clear that he's trying to root all of the storytelling decisions in the theme that he explores by the end of the film, because all the plot twists are ultimately building up to like the grandest of grand reveals. Right. It's like that. It's kind of a stupid reveal, but.
Thank you, because I didn't feel it was terribly grand. I just felt let down. About a third of the way through the film, I'd figured it out. What the end was. I will give you. There were two pieces of what Glass did that I didn't figure out. Those were two little twisty turns, and rather than being impressive and surprising, I was just like, oh, okay. And then the rest of it was just sort of like, this is what it, logically it builds there, which for me is a really good mark of Shyamalan's work. He doesn't not give you the hints as you go. I mean, he doesn't just, most of the time, he doesn't just throw an ending at you. He gives you just enough that you could piece it together if you want it.
That's all the time we have for this segment. I'm sorry to cut you off, but join us for the final segment where she'll be giving us our movie recommendation for the week. Stay tuned. Hello, welcome back. Now we're going to hand things over for this week's movie recommendation.
So I was given the option of recommending a television series.
Yes, you will.
And I would like to recommend Hap and Leonard from Sundance. And you can see it on, I think you can stream it on Amazon as well. They're in season 3, which I just picked up. The series is based on the Hap and Leonard books by Joe R. Lansdale, who is probably my favorite writer. Okay, maybe not my favorite, but he's one of the top 10. Really smart writing, funny, the sort of old noirish, but in a 1980s kind of way, southern fried, messy, dark humor, but warm heart sort of thing. It's a really good series. Michael K. Williams and James Purefoy are the stars of it. And just, yeah, not for the faint of heart, but definitely for fun. Jimmy, what's his last name? Anyway, I'm sorry. But it's a romp. It's definitely a romp.
For some reason, the way you're describing it, I'm envisioning some sort of crossover between Inherent Vice and True Detective in my head. So I don't know.
Yes, yes. Throw in a little bit of Old Town Louisiana sort of style, hidden back in the way back in the places nobody ever goes kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
The True Detective kind of feel
Yeah,
to it.
yeah.
So.
True Detective. Yes, True Detective. Because I've been watching that recently too, is a really good illusion. Except this has just this sharpness. True Detective has an intellectual lift to it, and this one has just this sort of rompy, crazy, campy kind of sharpness to it. That's a lot of fun.
And that's why I was also thinking Inherent Vice.
Yes. So yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Was it playing at Sundance, or was it?
No, it's just on the Sundance Channel. That's the station.
Okay, I've never heard of that. So.
You haven't heard of Sundance Channel, or?
No, I live in. Well, I don't have television, so.
Oh, well, see, there we go. That's what TV has.
Yeah.
It's a channel. I didn't know you'd. Okay.
I don't have cable, so
Okay.
everything I watch I either rent from the library or it's on Netflix. So.
Right. I have Amazon Prime, which is where I've been seeing it, is Amazon. It's on there.
I've thought about getting like Amazon Prime or Hulu, like something like that, because there's stuff on them, but I just haven't. I know there's going to be that new the George Clooney Catch-22's film is going to be on Hulu. So.
Yeah, and Umbrella Academy, which isn't that the one that just started on Netflix, right?
That was Velvet or something. I don't know.
Well, Velvet Buzzsaw too. Right?
Oh yeah.
That's the new one.
I haven't seen that, but I've heard of it. So.
Yeah, but I'm just I don't know, Joe R. Lansdale fan. I've been reading his stuff. He was a big horror writer for a long time, but he's also written regular novels, and his descriptive stuff, the way he uses language, it's just really, he's a national treasure as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. So, I mean, this is all stuff I'm unfamiliar with, so that's a good recommendation.
Yay.
Well, I guess that's all the time we have for this show. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can follow me at AntisocialCriti. That's critic without the C at the end of it. You can find past recordings of the show on the Groupthink Productions YouTube page, and you can find my written reviews at Geeks Under Grace and Legal Insurrection. I'm Tyler with the Fox Valley Film Critics. Have a wonderful day.